Good morning. We'll call this committee the whole meeting to order for January 22nd, 2025. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Barnes? Mr. Barnes?
Roll call, Mr. Barnes. Yes, I hear. Present.
You, I'm here.
Mrs. Burdick?
Here.
Mr. Curran?
Here.
Mr. Sears? Mr. Demick? Mr. Fanton? Mrs. Hanchett?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Havey?
Here.
Mr. Healy?
Here.
Mr. Ricky?
Here.
Mrs. Ricky Swales?
Here.
Mrs. Root? Here. Mr. Mumfeld?
Here.
Mr. Stockin?
Here.
Mr. Sear?
Present.
13 present, 2 absent.
Thank you.
We have a quorum.
Pretty light agenda today, so what I'm hoping for, and I ran it by Majority Leader Havey, we'll get through the few items we have in Committee of the Whole today, and then call a caucus for before lunch today. First order of business on the agenda is a brief discussion on the Connect All bead program. I think everybody's familiar with this in a couple email exchanges, but since we have time before any support letter has to be sent out, I thought we could discuss it here and make sure we're on the same page. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Administrator Knapp, but you're probably most familiar with this, at least the most familiar of those present. To get us up to speed on where we are with it, the nature of the program, et cetera.
I'll just let that battery get warmed up in that one, so. The BEAD program would be expanding broadband access across the state. I believe this is not just a state initiative. I believe it's a federal initiative. Other states have similar BEAD grants they're going after. It's something myself and Mr. Durham from planning have been looking at for a couple of months now. Verizon reached out to us over the summer, expressing some interest in applying for a BEAD grant. The county's interest in this, obviously, we want to make sure our citizens have good broadband access, but we're not required to do anything as part of this grant application. They ask for letters of support, which are common for all grants, and I believe, the more letters of support, the better their grant application has with the state. So Verizon reached out to us over the summer, thought they were looking at it, weren't sure what they would do, and then reached out again recently and said they are going to apply and would appreciate a letter of support. We hadn't heard from any of our other service providers in the area about broadband, looking at a BEAD grant. We did reach out to both Armstrong and Spectrum, and at this point in time, neither one of them were going to be applying. We didn't really have any lengthy conversations with them. Doesn't mean that they won't in the future, or they're still not looking at it, but right now they're not looking to the county for any letters of support on that.
I know you mentioned an email, but is it accurate that we can write a letter of support to Verizon? It doesn't preclude us from writing additional letters of support to other providers should they submit applications as well?
That's my understanding, and I believe that's even what we told Verizon, is that if other people would be interested, we would entertain their asks for letters of support as well.
Okay. And the board is in possession of the maps that Verizon provided, correct? I mean, I couldn't figure out what they were, if those were individual houses or what, but if the board wants more information on that, we can certainly get it. It appears as though the nature of this grant is to fill all those gaps that that didn't get captured in previous funding cycles.
It's why we have gaps, is because previous grants didn't address every single area. They went by census blocks, and they determined some census blocks it wasn't worth giving people money to invest in the county. So.
Okay. Gretchen?
Thank you, Carissa. I did reach out because I had worked with them in the past, wondering if they were interested, and they said that they are interested at this time. Whether they get it in, that's totally up to them, and they are also having some concerns just because you know how well the state pays, and they've been fighting the first one for 5 years to get paid, so.
They being Armstrong?
Armstrong. So I think I copied you on Kurt's response, so. So I guess then the ball's in their court whether they are going to or not, but it sounded like they still were interested in, so.
The county hasn't done anything to actively solicit people for broadband or cell coverage or any of that. It's something Kira and I have talked about. We've actually entertained talking to a consultant that you could pay to draw up more consolidated maps. I mean, you looked at the Verizon map, it's hard to read. You can look at Armstrong's, it's hard to read, but you could consolidate them all to provide a central point of data that anybody interested in doing broadband or cell phone coverage could look at and see if it's worth their risk or not. It's not something we brought to the board yet, but it's something Kira and I have looked at. How do you get people interested in working in our county? So.
My question, I guess, for Verizon, is this to lay fiber?
I believe that's what they said.
That's correct. And
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the qualifications of the funding is, my understanding, don't quote me on it, is that the funding is in phases, and the initial funding is very strict in terms of percent of households covered, the type of service, whether it's fiber or cellular or whatever. And then if there's no interest as the funding progresses, they get more lenient with the type of, maybe even the speed, but also the type of service and so forth. But this initial application would be for fiber.
So speaking for the ACTDC group, broadband, we've had discussions about, we have quite a few residents in Allegheny County that still has nothing. They don't have broadband, they don't have fiber. And fiber is going to be hard to get to them. And we've talked about perhaps what the ACTDC, needs to do is partner with some of these fiber companies like Verizon and work from some of their sites with mini towers to get down into some of our residents who are probably never going to have fiber. So I mean, I would be all for this. It can't hurt us here in Allegheny County to do this.
Mr. Barnes, then Mr. Healy.
Well, part of my
Microphone.
part of my question has already been answered about the status of the Allegheny County's system that they invested in 15 years ago or whatever it is. How many customers are being served with that system?
I'm not sure. ACTDC, which is Allegheny County Telecommunications Development Corp., which is an LLC the county formed. I'm not sure. I'm not on their board. I don't regularly participate in their meetings, although I do get their minutes. I don't know if there's been any disclosures made by the last mile providers they contract with on how many customers are being served. But that's a good question. I mean, that's something I think the county will want to look at when we renew our contracts with ACTDC probably in the coming year.
So I'll go back and, if I can, speak a little bit, hopefully for the ACTDC. It's been a long time coming and in progress. I understand we had a meeting last week that we're down to one tower left to have this new equipment put on. This equipment was supposed to have been put up in 3 years, and it's taken us over 5 to get it up. The last tower is in Alma, which is one of the largest areas of residence for our third mile providers to actually get customers. So our third mile providers have been kind of hand-tied a little bit because we have not, they've had to wait for us to get the new equipment up on the towers. So we're making progress, but there's still, I don't want to try to give you an estimate of how many. I know one of them actually got tired of waiting for one of the towers and went and got 100 customers on their own through a different mode of getting the signal to them. So we've got some work to do, and there's still a lot out there, and they're working hard to try to get these customers?
So the very succinct history of this is the county received grant money several boards ago to create a network of on our public safety towers, and we did that, and then we created the ACTDC to then market that network to last mile providers. The equipment that we purchased with the grant money to go on there, the radios that were on there, the frequency became obsolete with the FCC, and what we did is then ACTDC worked with Southern Tier West to get a grant to replace all the radios with an updated frequency, and that is the project that Legislator Root is just referring to. We're just waiting for one more tower to be finished, and then all the radios on those towers will have the updated frequency, which we should be using for that. Since we started that project, which I don't even remember the year off the top of my head, but it's got to be close to 15 years ago, the way internet's provided has changed significantly, and it's gone away from those sorts of radios to more of laying fiber has been the preferred method, and the method that the state has invested in, both with, I believe, the BEAD grant and the grant before, which was at Connect All, I believe, that Armstrong really heavily invested in the county. And so it's been something the county's been pushing for a number of years, but ACTDC is just trying to update right now the system that they have, and then we'll have further conversations about how that's fitting into the bigger picture.
Mr. Healy?
Thank you, Chairman. So the private corporation there that Deb's a part of, right? Are we still subsidizing them?
So part of when we formed this LLC is we gave them startup money, and I don't believe you've given them any startup money.
So they've been-
2019, you might have given them a small amount or entertained a request. I can't remember if you actually gave it to them. But the bulk of their money was much earlier when they first started up, but you have not given them any money in at least 5 years.
Well, I was unaware that of this Verizon project again. They've come to us in the past, I know. I think we did a letter before. Was it for Verizon or?
I can't, some of this predates me. I don't remember doing one for Verizon. We worked with COVID, during COVID, we worked with Armstrong. The
Right.
county actually applied for a grant that we would have had Armstrong be the subrecipient of, and we did not get that grant. That was a federal grant.
Well, I have no problems with a letter of support then, if nobody, especially if it's not going to jeopardize any hardwired infrastructure. I mean, that would be my preference throughout the county, just I think it's more reliable and dependable, especially under taking into consideration national security interests. But perhaps Verizon, Deb has mentioned a partnership with our local one at one time. Maybe they might even be interested in acquiring that. But I'm all for the letter of support anyway, so.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Sear? Maybe we can swap with Mr. Ricky for now. Ms. Root?
So I'll just, we had a meeting at the ACTDC the other day and talked about the future, and good conversation, heavy conversation concerning the future anyways. It was brought up that this is a economic development issue here in Allegheny County. We have a lot of residents who have no internet at all, and sometimes not even any cell service. So it also came up that it's a safety issue, a 911 issue, that some of these people have no way of even calling 911 from their homes unless they have a landline. So I think there is a need here that we need to look at. And as Carissa alluded, things have changed so much in the 15 years. It's changed a lot since you put us on the board. How many years ago when you
That was
just a couple
also
years ago.
2019 or 2020.
Yeah, the day, it's changed the way business and the broadband and the bandwidth and all that has changed. So we need to look at the future and see what's the best available. But there is a certain, to me, an economic development need here in Allegheny County to provide and to keep this going however we can.
Thank you. Legislator Ricketts Swales?
I just wanted to speak about District 1. There are many little places in District 1 where there is no cell phone service, and Ormel being one of them, which is right on Route 19. So it's not like every place is out in the middle of nowhere. So, and that affects public safety for sure.
Well, in lieu of, I just don't expect we're ever going to see any funding for improving cell service. So in lieu of that, I think you're right. I think it's important to capture as much of this broadband funding as possible, because if you can't call with a cell phone, you can at least Wi-Fi call 911 or whatever. But Mr. Rumfeld.
Yeah, just to echo Legislator Ricketts Swales, I get calls from people in Andover and Wellsville and Ward. No broadband, no cell service, not especially County Road 12, which is a major college hub. They can't even do the Wi-Fi calling on there because there's nothing. And when they called like Armstrong, everybody else said, well, the county didn't authorize us to go that far, is their response. So they said they went as far as they were authorized, and that came from somebody that lives in the town of Ward, so.
The county didn't authorize anything. I think they probably meant the state with the Connect All grant.
Okay, so we don't need to take board action on this, but if we've got the thumbs up to provide the letter of support, we'll do that on behalf of the board. And if, I'm guessing if Armstrong or Spectrum follow up and decide they want to make application, just go ahead and provide those as well? Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is an update and some recommendations from Deputy Administrator Short regarding the Office of County Historian. Good morning. Press your button there, please. It is?
All right, maybe, yeah, there we go. All right, sorry for that, thank you. So I wanted to come in today and offer an update on where we are with the Office of the Historian and the materials in the collection that has been historically managed by that office. So we have had 2 meetings so far with a group of volunteers that we have sought out by our municipal historians, our historical associations, and any of their friends have been made welcome. So the third Thursday of every month, we have dedicated time in the afternoon to go down to the historical collection and initiate an inventory. So that is well underway. And it has sparked some really great collaboration between our local historians and some of our local historical groups. And it's also sparked an interest, a number of people on the position of county historian. So I wanted to offer you that update and also come to you and offer a recommendation and make a request that we look at filling the position in the role of county historian. It is a position under New York State law that we are obligated to have filled. In the past, it's been filled full-time when it was also included the role of the records retention officer, records management officer. But at this time, we've separated that out, so it would be just the responsibility of county historian, which there's the New York State historian, there's the county historians, and then there are town historians that are all positions that are required to be filled. So if you'd like to know more about the role of the county historian, we have our civil service local job description on what we'd like to fill that role with. We also have direction from New York State on what the role is. And I think a really important distinction that a lot of people don't connect with is that the county historian is not responsible for genealogy research. But I think that is the most frequent request from the office and probably from a lot of the historian's office, because people are searching for where they came from and who their people were. So part of what the historian's collection is some materials that would be useful in that search, but it's not research that a county historian can do on their behalf. So part of that hope is getting that inventory and making sure we know what we have that people could then request to access or however that looks down the road. But at this time, we aren't prepared for that. So by filling the county historian role part-time, hopefully will get us a lot closer, significantly faster to having an idea of what our inventory is, what our materials are, and then being able to have someone with the knowledge and experience to come back to you and offer you reasonable recommendations on that collection.
Jen?
So this is going to be part-time or full?
Part-time.
Okay. And I just want one more question about the genealogy. I know in Andover, the Historical Museum, I guess they call it over there, has a vast collection of genealogy. Is there any reason that what you have or what the county has here can't be given to them so that they can add it to their collection and then they have everything in one place?
So this board has already acted to permanently loan the material to some of our materials, some of the research that's been done over the years by volunteers and former county historians, to the Historical Society because they have established hours, they're open to the public, and they're very interested in that. There's significant interest not only from the Allegheny County Historical Society, but other historical societies that also non-for-profits that are able to assist in genealogy research. So is that a path the board could look at? Absolutely. Once we have a full inventory. And Phil, you were there. It's a vast collection, so we need to get our arms more wrapped around what we have and truly a dedicated record of it before we could consider loaning out or what the board would want to do. It will be a board decision, obviously, but probably having recommendations and having better collaborations with our local municipalities. I know some towns have dedicated space for historical collections. Some have partnered very closely with their community libraries, which I love, and some don't. But their history should be preserved if it's our responsibility. So should be preserved either way. But continuing in that path forward of the collaboration and that open communication and then the working together is essential in my mind. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? What's the role on the board in the appointment of a historian?
I believe it's a board appointment, so it would be your call, and then it would run concurrent with your term. So there would be 1 year left.
And then we'd have to reappoint? The next board will have to reappoint? You say part-time. Do you have a better idea of just how part-time it is? Or would be?
What I've kind of thrown around is 10 hours a week at least, maybe a couple days. It probably align it with other positions, part-time positions in our section 4, right? Which would be like $15.50 to $17.50 an hour, kind of like our drivers with the OFA. We've had some of our volunteers say they'd like to come, they want to start coming every day for a few hours to get it knocked out. So having an employee on hand to be there would open up the number of hours that people could go through and create the collection and the log. As long as it's less than half time, I think we'd be fine. Once we go more than half time, there's other conversations with collective bargaining units that we'd have to have potentially. So minimum of 10 hours per week, I guess, is the way I would want to put it.
Mr. Ricky?
How many hours is halftime?
17 and a half?
35 is considered full-time.
Yeah.
Kind of a silly question here. I'm assuming their workspace would be the church. Is that a safe workspace? Is it a
Yes.
heated workspace?
It is a heated workspace. There's no restrooms there. So it would be a matter of using the Board of Elections or coming up to the county building. I don't think it would be the only workspace. I think that would be where a significant amount of their work is. But we could also find a desk for them when they're doing any sort of research or anything like that. But that is, yes, a very practical question. Maybe not for the first year, but second year, third year.
How do you, go ahead, Mr. Burns.
Where is the current space
Oh, it's the church on Willits Avenue?
here in Belmont?
Yes.
The question was, where is the space where the materials are currently held, and it's at the church on Willits Avenue. How do you envision the role, so you get through this inventory process, how do you envision the role changing, and what does it look like after that?
So the role of the historian is to fulfill any research the state historian provides and supervise any local historians, municipal historians that are also engaged in that work. They don't supervise the municipal historians in general, just any work that they do at a task from the state historian. And they should be creating a better relationship between all of the local historians. They should be engaged in creating that environment. They're also obligated to report at least annually to you all on the goings-on of Allegheny County. We also have the semi-sesquicentennial coming up, so I think there would be a need for a research solution or someone that would dredge up Allegheny County history as it came around through the years of their country. So I think I definitely see the role as custodian of those materials, but also someone that would be engaged in research for the board and for the county in general.
Ms. Root?
I see the role, and you touched on it a little bit, collaborating with the local municipalities and the historians that they have. In SIO, we have a history room in the SIO library, and we kind of fill the need for our town. And one of the things, as looking into it, was that all the towns and municipalities were supposed to work with the county historian. And I think that would be good. And I hear the collaboration that you've got going on right now, so I hope that continues, because I think there's a lot of work being done on the town levels that if we all work together, especially coming up with a celebration and all that. But I see that as a role going down to work with all the local town historians, because I think it would be nice to have that collaboration.
Yeah, and they already get together on a regular basis for a round table, but it's 6 people this time, 10 people that time, and if we can engage more with our residents that are passionate about history and not just the historians, it might be somewhat of a relief for some historians. Most historians that I've seen, they're not doing it for the wages that they may or may not receive from the municipalities. They're doing it because it's their passion, it's their, their life's work, sometimes post-retirement. That's what, they're engaged in. And it's so relevant and important to them. So creating that collaborative space and increasing that more and more is great.
I've got a couple more questions. Tough one for Administrator Knapp. What's the long-term plan for storing the materials?
At this point in time, it's tough to make that long-term plan until we actually know how much of that materials we should retain, how much that we should be returning to other people. Anybody that has seen the materials down at the former Episcopal Church in Belmont knows it's a lot, and probably not all of that is truly ours. And I think this will help us figure out what our long-term storage would be. Some of this stuff we could look at contracting with historical societies to host on our behalf as well. So, and some of the stuff we might want to keep on site. There are a number of items in there that look to me like they'd be appropriate to display here in the county building or to house here permanently. So some of them are our own records on our own. There's a lot of photos of the county board proceedings, so this would be very appropriate to host here.
So while I'm on that, maybe just for the sake of getting it into the minutes, we all know that there are some historical materials that are currently stored at the fairgrounds. I think it's the board's desire to get that under control. That needs to get inventoried as well. The Fair Board has asked that they be removed. I think there's interest maybe by the Historical Society in taking possession of some of those, which I don't think at this point is appropriate because it hasn't gone through that inventory process. But maybe can we refocus on getting that material rounded up as part of this process? Then we can determine, where best to house that stuff.
I think that, and I'm familiar with that collection. You can see it when you walk through the fairgrounds. I think that's much easier to inventory, and we could make that the historian's duty to go inventory that, and then we can figure out where to house that too.
Collection's a generous term.
There are some very significant things there too,
Right.
like the old transom window from the original courthouse up here is just probably one of the most prominent pieces in that collection that perhaps you don't want other places. Maybe you want displayed here in this courthouse.
Right. Thank you. Last question. This is probably a Carissa question as well. With the old historian, he was largely a department of one. And I'm not sure if there was sufficient supervision of the work of the office. Where does the historian fall from here forward in terms of supervision?
You're correct. We don't like departments of one. They tend to be inefficient all the way around. We really haven't laid out an organizational chart for this. With it just being a part-time hourly position for the remainder of the year, they would be reporting directly to myself and probably more specifically to Ms. Short.
And then long-term plan to be determined?
Yes, you don't have to have a full-time historian. Most places, I believe, don't have a full-time historian. If you did a part-time, or you could, do part-time in conjunction with contracting things out, then it just becomes somebody that just reports to myself and to the board on what they're doing with historian stuff. Previously, we had a full-time historian, combined historian duties with records management, and tried to flesh out a full-time position in a department of one, and I don't think that's probably in our best interest to continue that model.
I don't want to speak for the board, but I'm guessing the board isn't interested in adding another role to be directly supervised by the board or for monthly reports, or I just don't know, but that's my guess. Any other questions, comments on that? So next step is you bring a MOE to us, or do we just forge ahead with an appointment? It would be nice to get some recommendations.
We can forge ahead with an appointment. We can bring you some recommendations on who to appoint. There will need to be a budget transfer within the historian budget account. We did not know if we would be hiring someone or contracting, so we put the money in contractual services, and we'll need to just transfer it over to the point ones for personnel services. The treasurer's working on an MOE for that right now. That shouldn't delay your decisions on any appointments. We'll have that money transferred to the appropriate account before we hire someone.
Now, that doesn't mean that any members of this board couldn't bring someone forward that they had heard had an interest in the role, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So we're thinking time frame, what?
I'd love to see it posted publicly for a couple weeks to garner as much interest as possible, and then bring back to you all, who we believe to be most qualified. We have the updated job description, so it identifies what we believe the typical work activities are, so people know what they're signing up for. We have the necessary information from what we're gathering from you today to do that, and then bring back to you what we have. So I'd have to look at the board schedule. Would you want it to come back to another cow? Would you want it to come back through Ways and Means? What are you thinking?
I think if it's just getting the go-ahead to post and so forth, I think just fast track it however you can fast track it. Once we get talking about who to appoint, that might require more conversation. Ms. Hanchett?
Are we going to get a copy of the job description?
I have some with me today, so if you'd like one, it's something that would be included,
Okay, thank you.
in any posting.
Ms. Burdick, then Ms. Ricketts-Wells.
I just have a question. Our previous historian would go out into the community and give presentations, but he was full-time, so I'm assuming that that was included in his salary. Now that this person is going to be part-time, is this person also going to be going out into the community doing presentations? And if so, will that be extra hours added to their time? And are we going to budget
That was an additional duty to the role that the historian, as that role, it was included in that role. It would be up to the board to identify whether that is something outside of what we're obligated to do with county historian, and if we have someone with the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do so. I don't know that we're obligated to do that, especially with the undertaking of the inventory. I would think that would be prioritized over other things. So definitely that would be at the board's discretion. We would need some direction on that as we, supervise and assign duties.
That's my feeling as well. It's not part of the historian's actual job duties to do that. That was an add-on extra that the board allowed our former historian to do to kind of flesh out the position as a full-time role. But that is not something that is part of the historian's actual job duties or legal requirements by the state for us to actually do. A nice thing, but it's an add-on.
But if it's something the board finds value in, it's something that should be considered during the appointment process. Jen?
I just have a question is about like the volunteers. It sounds like there's a good pool of volunteers. So would this person then be able to supervise those volunteers? And is there any liability of the fact that most of the stuff's in that church?
I think the historian could coordinate the volunteer activities correctly. I'm really not sure if I could speak to the liability of housing items in the church. I know we've talked to DPW. We've had code enforcement also down there. They've approved it to store the items, but I think we all recognize it's probably less than an ideal place to store our historical artifacts. There is some measure of security down there as well. I do want to mention that we do have security cameras and other things down there, and it is a locked facility, so it's not open to the public.
Even when it's unlocked, it's hard to open the door. It's that secure. Okay, anything else for that? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sotkin.
comment of interest in the whole historian thing, and then when you're thinking about space and long-term, in Hamlet of Kennedy on the south edge of town, Mr. Crandall used to have a monument building there, right on 19, and he and his wife gifted that to the town. It's going to be our museum. It will be many months before it's actually open, but we met, first meeting with architect for design on things yesterday, and there was a long conversation about climate control in such a place, keeping the humidity a certain level all year round, the temperatures, all that. And so it's not like you can just take stuff and put it in an empty building somewhere and expect it to last. And I don't think we have a facility anywhere yet that meets those expectations.
Maybe we can use yours.
But it's neat. We're having a lot of fun with this project. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, good on that? Thank you, Ms. Short. Okay, just like some housekeeping stuff for the NISAC conference, we've got to kind of take a couple informal polls here on what the board wishes to do. There's something that they've added this year for the conference. Apologies, I don't have the list in front of me of who's attending, but there is meeting at the Capitol on, help me if I'm wrong, Brenda, Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. That's unusual for us. It may be related to the 100th anniversary thing, I'm not sure. But in addition to that, Assemblyman Sempolinski has invited us to join him at his office in the Capitol, not the actual Capitol, but the thing across the street there. So we need to find out, for those of you who are interested, is it something that you would like to try to do at the same time as, or around those meetings, that 4 to 6 meeting at the Capitol? Or would you like me to try to schedule time with him on Wednesday morning, like we've done in the past? I just recall that oftentimes, by the time we get to Wednesday, people have worked themselves so hard up in Albany that they're ready to go home. So don't need an answer today, but if we get maybe Brenda to send out an email and try to get gauge interest on that, whether or not you do Tuesday, not Wednesday, or Tuesday, the sessions go all the way up till almost 4 o'clock. So it wouldn't be practical to do anything before 4 o'clock. So either after our meeting at the Capitol at 6 o'clock and on, if you want to do that. If you do Wednesday, either or, and none of the above. Because I want to be able to let the Assemblyman know if we're coming at all, and if we are coming, how many are coming. So keep an eye out for an email on that. I'm also reminding you that hoping for a caucus, and we're going to try to do it in here. Maybe we'll take 10 and do it immediately following this meeting. Any unfinished business? New business? For the good of the order, the clerk of the board is requesting another picture this afternoon. We have everybody in-house this afternoon. So I know that we're maybe not all wearing what we would want to wear, but at least we have all of us, and so we'll all just go down together. Oh, we don't have Fred or Dwight.
Oh, that's right, they're at the public,
All right.
so we can't do it.
Okay, we'll Photoshop them in. All right, scratch that. Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. They're at conference. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Mr. Rumfeld.
Mr. Chairman, as there appears to be no other business to come before the committee of the whole this morning, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?